In the grim darkness of the far future, war is an unrelenting constant. Across the vast expanse of the galaxy, millions of conflicts rage on 1,000 battlefronts, each one a brutal testament to the unyielding nature of the Imperium of man. Entire planets are reduced to cinders, void ships clash in the cold abyss of space, and armies numbering in the billions fight and die in service to the God Emperor. Amidst the chaos of total war, the weapons wielded by mankind's countless soldiers are not those of precision craftsmanship or cutting-edge innovation. The Imperium does not arm its warriors with weapons of elegance or sophistication. Instead, it arms them with something far more valuable: reliability. And at the heart of that philosophy stands the lasgun. It is a weapon of paradoxes. In a galaxy where alien races wield technology beyond comprehension, where transhuman warriors carry arms of ancient devastation, and where the warp itself warps reality, the lasgun remains unshaken. It is mocked by those who do not understand its purpose, dismissed as a crude, underpowered tool when compared to the weapons of the Imperium's mightiest warriors. But those who underestimate it fail to grasp the grim truth of its design. The lasgun is not meant to win wars through superior firepower. It is not meant to cut down the enemies of mankind in a single glorious shot. It is not meant to be wielded by heroes or champions. It is a weapon of the masses, an instrument of war designed not for the individual, but for the collective. To understand the lasgun is to understand the very nature of the Imperium itself. A monolithic, uncompromising force that values function over form, quantity over quality, and absolute endurance over fleeting superiority. For over 10,000 years, the lasgun has remained a staple of the Imperial Guard, issued in numbers beyond counting to the countless legions of humanity's defenders. Its design has endured for millennia with minimal change, a testament to its simple yet effective construction. Unlike other weapons of war that demand constant maintenance, rare materials, or intricate craftsmanship, the lasgun is forged with a singular purpose: to function, no matter the conditions, no matter the wielder, and no matter the enemy. But is it truly the most reliable weapon in the Imperium? Does its sheer ubiquity make it superior, or is its reputation exaggerated by necessity? How does it compare to the myriad weapons that litter the battlefields of the 41st millennium, from the plasma weapons of the Adeptus Astartes to the arcane armaments of the Adeptus Mechanicus? And what role does it play in the grand strategy of the Imperium's war machine? To answer these questions, we must go beyond the myths and misconceptions that surround this weapon. We must examine its history, its users, and its impact on the Imperium's endless war for survival. Only then can we understand if the Imperial Lasgun truly deserves its reputation as the most reliable weapon in the galaxy, or if its status is nothing more than a necessity born from mankind's unrelenting war for existence. At the heart of this discussion stand the many factions and forces that rely upon or influence the use of the Imperial Lasgun. Spanning the vast military structure of the Imperium, these groups shape the production, deployment, and effectiveness of the weapon in countless ways. Some view it as a symbol of unity, a necessary tool in the defense of mankind, while others see it as a crude instrument of mass attrition. Regardless of perspective, its place in the grand machinery of war is undeniable. The Astra Militarum is the most direct and widespread user of the lasgun. Comprising uncountable regiments drawn from thousands of worlds, they are the hammer of the Imperium's military might, waging war in numbers beyond reckoning. Their soldiers carry the lasgun not out of preference, but out of necessity. It is the weapon given to them, the tool that must serve them in every battle, from the trenches of hellish sieges to the void-sealed corridors of boarding actions. It is the backbone of their arsenal, an equalizer that allows even the most poorly trained conscript to contribute to the fight. The nature of their structure demands a weapon that can be mass-produced, easily maintained, and replaced in an instant, qualities the lasgun embodies perfectly. The Departmentum Munitorum oversees the supply and distribution of lasguns across the Imperium. This massive bureaucratic engine ensures that every soldier, From the fresh recruit to the battle-hardened veteran has access to their standard-issue rifle. It dictates the patterns of the weapon, the manufacturing quotas, and the logistical chains that span star systems. Without its endless flow of resources, the lasgun would not exist in the numbers required to sustain the unending war effort. The organization's decisions shape the variants produced, the features included or excluded, and the extent to which local forge worlds may modify the weapon's base design. The Adeptus Mechanicus plays a vital role in the production and technological oversight of lasgun manufacturing. While they do not wield the weapon themselves as a primary tool of war, they are its architects, guardians of its schematics, and arbiters of its continued existence. The forges of Mars and its many subsidiary worlds churn out countless lasguns, each following templates that have remained unchanged for thousands of years. Their strict adherence to ancient doctrine ensures that the weapon remains reliable, but also limits its evolution. To them, deviation from standard designs risks heresy, and even the most minor alterations must be sanctioned by their priesthood. Despite this, certain forges produce their own patterns, resulting in minor variations that reflect regional preferences or battlefield necessities. The Officio Prefectus, more commonly known as the Commissariat, does not manufacture or distribute lasguns, but its officers are deeply tied to their presence on the battlefield. These enforcers of discipline ensure that the soldiers wielding the weapon do not falter in their duty. To them, the lasgun is more than a tool of war. It is a symbol of the soldier's obligation to fight without hesitation. They ensure that it is fired when ordered, that retreat is not an option, and that fear is met with swift and brutal consequences. The weapon's ease of use allows them to enforce their will upon even the most inexperienced recruits, ensuring that every soldier can perform their duty under threat of summary execution. Beyond the Imperium's vast administrative and military branches, other factions influence or interact with the lasgun in significant ways. Rogue traders, operating on the fringes of human space, often find themselves equipped with surplus or modified versions of the weapon. While they have access to more exotic armaments, the lasgun's reliability makes it a common staple among their crews, especially for those unable to afford constant resupply. The Imperial Navy, though primarily focused on void warfare, maintains security forces that rely on the lasgun as their standard armament. While naval engagements are fought with macro cannons and lance batteries, boarding actions and shipboard security rely on simple, functional weapons. The lasgun's ability to function in zero gravity, its lack of recoil, and its minimal need for physical ammunition make it an ideal choice for fighting within the corridors of Imperial warships. It is wielded by naval armsmen tasked with repelling boarding actions, securing key compartments, and enforcing discipline among lower-deck crew members. Various planetary defense forces across the Imperium also make use of the lasgun, though the extent to which they rely upon it depends on their level of access to Imperial resources. Some worlds field regiments equipped identically to the Astra Militarum, while others may have locally produced variants that differ in design, function, or even power levels. These forces are often the first line of defense against external threats, using the same weapons that their more organized counterparts employ on the grand stage of interstellar war. Even outside the Imperium's sanctioned military forces, the lasgun finds its way into the hands of other groups, both lawful and illicit. Underhive gangs, planetary rebels, and criminal organizations frequently obtain the weapon through black market trade or battlefield scavenging. While some of these groups view it as a lesser tool compared to the brutal close combat weapons favored in gang warfare, its ability to be modified and maintained with minimal resources makes it a sought-after firearm in conflicts where supply chains are unreliable. Certain Imperial cults, especially those that glorify war as a form of worship, see the lasgun as a sacred instrument of the Emperor's will. To them, it is not just a weapon, but a divine tool through which they enact their righteous fury. Some engage in elaborate rituals before battle, blessing their rifles or engraving litanies upon their casings, believing that faith will make their shots strike true. Even the Space Marines, though they do not wield the lasgun themselves, interact with it through their campaigns alongside the Astra Militarum. To these genetically enhanced warriors, it is a weapon of mortals, a tool that serves its purpose but lacks the devastating power required for their own methods of war. However, they recognize its role in the larger strategy of the Imperium, knowing that the vast bulk of their human allies rely upon it to thin enemy ranks before the Angels of Death strike with their own, far more destructive weaponry. Across the many arms of the Imperium, the lasgun remains a constant presence. Whether in the hands of a conscripted recruit, a disciplined veteran, or a lawless scavenger, it endures as the most widespread instrument of war. Each faction plays a role in its continued use, ensuring that it remains the weapon of choice for humanity's vast armies. But while its reach is undeniable, the question remains, does its presence alone make it the most reliable weapon in the Imperium, or is its status simply a reflection of necessity? The origins of the Imperial Lasgun can be traced back to a time when humanity was forced to adapt to the harsh realities of interstellar warfare. Long before the Imperium of man rose to dominate the stars, early human civilizations faced the challenge of developing weapons that could sustain large-scale conflicts across diverse environments. The need for a standardized firearm emerged from centuries of strife, as wars between planetary factions, rogue empires, and emerging coalitions demanded a weapon that could be mass-produced, easily maintained, and wielded by forces with varying levels of training. Before the lasgun became the standard-issue weapon of humanity's soldiers, early firearms relied on chemical propellants and ballistic projectiles. While effective, these weapons presented numerous logistical problems. Ammunition had to be manufactured, stored, and transported in massive quantities. Environmental conditions such as extreme temperatures, atmospheric differences, and gravitational inconsistencies often impacted performance. The limitations of conventional firearms became even more evident as humanity expanded beyond its homeworld, encountering battlefields that rendered traditional weaponry unreliable. During humanity's first great expansion into the stars, various energy-based weapons were developed as alternatives to traditional firearms. These early directed energy weapons laid the foundation for what would eventually become the lasgun. While many of these prototypes were crude and inefficient by modern standards, they proved that directed energy could be harnessed for combat. However, the materials required for these weapons were often rare, the power sources unreliable, and their maintenance beyond the capabilities of most soldiers. This led to a gradual refinement of the technology, with a focus on simplifying designs and making them suitable for mass production. The age of technology saw significant advances in weapon development, leading to the creation of numerous energy-based firearms. During this period, humanity's technological achievements reached unparalleled heights, with some weapons rivaling or even surpassing those of later millennia. However, many of these advancements were lost due to catastrophic events that followed, particularly during the collapse of interstellar civilization. With the onset of the Age of Strife, vast quantities of knowledge were forgotten, manufacturing centers fell into ruin, and entire worlds were cut off from the wider human domain. As war became more desperate and widespread, the need for a weapon that could function without reliance on complex supply chains became paramount. By the time the Imperium of man emerged, the lessons of previous ages had been learned at an immense cost. The horrors of the Age of Strife had proven that advanced technology was not enough to ensure survival. Humanity needed weapons that could be deployed in numbers beyond reckoning, requiring minimal upkeep while maintaining a level of effectiveness that allowed soldiers to fight for extended periods without concern for resource depletion. The Imperium's doctrine of mass warfare, built upon the overwhelming might of sheer numbers, dictated that its standard-issue weapon had to be one that any soldier could use with little training and that could function in the most hostile conditions imaginable. The lasgun was not chosen for its overwhelming power or tactical superiority. It was chosen because it could be produced in astronomical quantities and sustained in war without reliance on delicate supply chains. Its power source could be recharged with minimal resources, its components could withstand years of wear and tear, and its simplicity meant that it could be wielded effectively by anyone capable of pointing and firing. These factors made it the weapon of choice for the Imperium's vast military forces, ensuring that its soldiers were never without an effective means of combat. As the Imperium expanded and its wars grew in scale, the lasgun's importance became even more pronounced. The conflicts of the Great Crusade demonstrated that a weapon's effectiveness was not determined solely by its raw power, but by its ability to remain functional across countless battlefronts. The demands of the Imperium's war machine required a weapon that could be carried by billions, deployed on millions of worlds, and used without fear of failure. The lasgun fulfilled these requirements, cementing its place as the primary armament of the Imperium's soldiery. In the centuries that followed, no significant effort was made to replace the lasgun with a more powerful alternative. The Adeptus Mechanicus, tasked with overseeing the technological infrastructure of the Imperium, ensured that its design remained largely unchanged. While various patterns of lasgun emerged, each adapted to the specific needs of different regiments and war zones, the core principles remained the same. Attempts to introduce more advanced infantry weapons on a large scale were often met with resistance, as the logistical challenges of producing anything more sophisticated outweighed any potential advantages. The Imperium's vast bureaucracy, with its rigid adherence to tradition, further ensured that the lasgun remained the dominant weapon of the Astra Militarum. The necessity of maintaining a standardized weapon across the Imperium's military structure led to the enforcement of strict regulations regarding lasgun production. Every forge world responsible for manufacturing the weapon adhered to templates that had been in place for thousands of years. While minor modifications were permitted to accommodate local production capabilities, any deviation from the established schematics required extensive approval from the Adeptus Mechanicus. This ensured that no matter where a soldier was deployed, the lasgun they carried would be functionally identical to those wielded by their comrades across the galaxy. By the current era of the 41st millennium, the lasgun has become more than just a weapon. It is a symbol of the Imperium's enduring philosophy of war, one of resilience, adaptability, and the relentless drive to sustain its forces in an unending conflict. Its widespread use is not a testament to its superiority over other weapons, but rather to its ability to meet the harsh demands of a galaxy-spanning empire. While more powerful weapons exist, few can match the lasgun in sheer availability, durability, and ease of use. The conditions that led to its dominance were shaped by millennia of conflict, technological regression, and the logistical necessities of an empire at constant war. The question that remains is whether these qualities truly make it the most reliable weapon in the Imperium, or if its widespread use is simply a reflection of the Imperium's reliance on mass warfare above all else. The widespread adoption of the lasgun was not an instantaneous decision, but a result of a gradual process shaped by war, necessity, and technological standardization. Over the course of thousands of years, its role evolved alongside the shifting priorities of the Imperium. The weapon's place within the vast war machine of humanity was secured through key developments, each reinforcing its dominance on the battlefield. The earliest significant step in the lasgun's history was its refinement during the age of technology. While rudimentary energy weapons had existed before, they were often bulky, unstable, and impractical for mass deployment. Advances in power cell efficiency and beam-focusing mechanisms allowed for a more compact and reliable design, making directed energy firearms a viable alternative to traditional projectile weapons. However, during this era, las-based weaponry remained one option among many, competing with various plasma, kinetic, and exotic designs. The abundance of resources and knowledge at the time meant that no single weapon was prioritized over all others. With the onset of the Age of Strife, the situation changed drastically. Interstellar wars, isolation, and technological collapse forced humanity to rely on whatever weaponry could be maintained with minimal infrastructure. Many advanced weapons became unusable due to a lack of expertise, spare parts, or stable supply chains. During this time, LAS-based firearms demonstrated a crucial advantage. Their power cells could be recharged in a variety of ways, including solar exposure and makeshift energy sources, making them more sustainable than chemically propelled weapons. This era saw the gradual disappearance of more complex designs, leaving only the most durable and easily maintained weapons in widespread use. As the Imperium of Man rose during the Great Crusade, the need for a standardized infantry weapon became clear. The Imperium's expansion required a logistical system that could support war efforts across thousands of war zones without reliance on local production inconsistencies. The Lasgun, by then already proven in smaller-scale conflicts, was selected as the primary weapon for the growing military forces of the Imperium. Its ease of production, low maintenance requirements, and adaptability made it ideal for the massive-scale warfare that the Imperium engaged in. Standardized templates were issued, and manufacturers across countless worlds began producing the weapon in numbers beyond calculation. The Unification Wars on Terra served as the first large-scale demonstration of the Lasgun's effectiveness as a mass-deployable weapon. While various other arms were used in these battles, LAS-based firearms became a staple of the newly unified forces. The wars proved that a weapon's strategic value was not solely in its raw power, but in its reliability and availability. These early conflicts established the Lasgun's role in planetary warfare, setting the precedent for its use across the Imperium. During the Great Crusade, the Lasgun was deployed on an unprecedented scale. Entire planetary populations were drafted into war efforts, often equipped with these standardized weapons. While far more powerful armaments existed within the Imperium's forces, the Lasgun remained the backbone of the human military structure. Its ability to function in extreme environments, from frozen wastelands to irradiated wastelands, further cemented its place as the primary armament of humanity's soldiers. With the onset of the Horus Heresy, the Lasgun was tested under circumstances it had never faced before. No longer was the Imperium fighting external threats alone. Now its own forces were divided, and the weapon had to be used against adversaries who had once wielded it side by side with loyalist troops. The conflict saw the mass deployment of Imperial Army regiments on battlefields that spanned entire systems, and the Lasgun became a crucial component in these large-scale engagements. While it was often outmatched by more advanced or specialized weapons, its sheer ubiquity ensured that the fighting forces of both sides could sustain prolonged combat. The Heresy also saw the first instances of significant modifications to the Lasgun's design, as different factions sought to enhance its power output or integrate it with newly developed battlefield tactics. Following the Imperium's reformation after the Horus Heresy, the Lasgun's role solidified further. The restructuring of the Imperial military into separate organizations ensured that the weapon remained in use across all planetary defense forces and regiments. The newly established Astra Militarum inherited the Lasgun as its standard-issue weapon, with every new regiment trained in its use from the moment of conscription. The Adeptus Mechanicus, now the sole authority on technology, formalized its production and enforced rigid adherence to its standardized patterns. Any attempt to introduce alternative weapons for mass deployment was dismissed as inefficient, ensuring that the Lasgun remained unchallenged as the primary firearm of humanity's armed forces. As the Imperium expanded into its modern era, the Lasgun underwent only minor refinements rather than fundamental redesigns. While some Forge worlds experimented with variations, producing models with enhanced focusing arrays, reinforced casings, or altered energy dispersion, the core weapon remained the same. The Imperium's doctrine of war did not prioritize individual firepower, and the Lasgun's intended purpose, to be wielded in the hands of countless billions, remained unchanged. During the many wars against Xenos threats, the lasgun proved both its strengths and its limitations. Against lightly armored opponents, such as certain orc forces or lower-ranked Tyranid bioforms, it performed adequately in sheer volume of fire. However, against heavily armored foes, such as Necron warriors or elite alien infantry, its lack of penetrating power became evident. While it could never match the destructive potential of bolters, plasma weaponry, or melta-guns, its presence in overwhelming numbers ensured that Imperial forces could continue to resist and, when necessary, drown their enemies in sheer attrition. The late 41st millennium saw the Imperium plunged into an era of near-constant war. The lasgun, having already survived thousands of years of conflict, continued to serve as the weapon of choice for the masses. The Imperium's reliance on it only deepened as supply lines became strained, and the need for easily maintained weapons grew ever more urgent. Despite the emergence of new threats and technological challenges, the lasgun remained the one constant in the Imperium's endless war machine. By the present day, it is clear that the lasgun's dominance was not achieved through superior firepower, but through its ability to function regardless of circumstance. Its rise was dictated by necessity, its endurance by practicality. Every major conflict that shaped the Imperium reinforced its position, proving that in a galaxy where resources are scarce, logistics are strained, and war never ceases. Reliability is the most valuable trait a weapon can possess. Whether this makes the lasgun the most reliable weapon of all is a question that lingers, but one thing remains certain. So long as the Imperium endures, the lasgun will remain at its heart. The defining moment that cemented the lasgun as the Imperium's primary weapon was not a single battle or grand decree, but a decision rooted in the very foundation of Imperial military doctrine. It was a choice driven by pragmatism rather than technological superiority, a commitment to standardization that would shape the future of human warfare for millennia. While countless conflicts and logistical challenges contributed to its dominance, the most pivotal decision was the formalization of its mass production under the strict control of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Departamento Munitorum. This decision took place in the wake of the Horus Heresy during the restructuring of the Imperium's military forces. The vast reforms that followed the catastrophic civil war reshaped every aspect of the Imperium's war machine, from its chain of command to its methods of supply. In the aftermath of galactic-scale devastation, there was no room for inefficiency or deviation. The Imperium required a singular approach to warfare that could be sustained indefinitely. One of the most critical aspects of this restructuring was the complete overhaul of how the Imperium armed its soldiers. The Departamento Munitorum, tasked with ensuring the Imperium's armies remained supplied across millions of battlefronts, faced an unprecedented challenge. The sheer scale of post-heresy warfare demanded a weapon that could be manufactured at a rate that matched the ever-growing attrition of Imperial forces. Fragmented production methods, varied patterns of weaponry, and inconsistent supply chains had all contributed to unnecessary logistical failures during the Heresy. To prevent such weaknesses from threatening the Imperium's survival again, a radical solution was required, a single weapon design that could be produced on every forge world, used by every regiment, and maintained with minimal resources. The Adeptus Mechanicus, now the undisputed authority on technology in the Imperium, fully embraced this shift. In accordance with the doctrines of the newly solidified Cult Mechanicus, deviation from established templates was seen as inefficiency at best and outright heresy at worst. This strict adherence to standardization ensured that every forge world capable of manufacturing weaponry would produce the same design, eliminating the inconsistencies that had plagued pre-heresy supply lines. The decision to enforce a single universal infantry weapon was not taken lightly, but once enacted, it became an unbreakable law of Imperial logistics. This standardization was formalized with the adoption of the M35 pattern lasgun, a design that would become synonymous with Imperial military doctrine. While slight regional variations existed, the core specifications remained unchanged across all production facilities. The weapon's power source, energy dispersion rate, and structural integrity were all designed to meet the Imperium's rigid criteria. Unlike plasma or bolt weapons, which required rare materials and delicate maintenance, the lasgun could be assembled with common resources and function in virtually any environment. This decision shaped the way the Imperium waged war. Once the lasgun was established as the standard-issue firearm, every logistical system was built around its availability. Every training regimen incorporated its use, ensuring that recruits from every corner of the Imperium could wield it effectively with minimal instruction. The ease of its maintenance meant that even soldiers deployed in war zones with no access to resupply could keep their weapons operational using scavenged parts and improvised charging methods. Unlike ballistic firearms, which required ammunition production and transportation, the lasgun's energy cells could be recharged in the field, reducing the burden on supply chains. The adoption of the lasgun as the Imperium's universal infantry weapon was not without its detractors. Some within the Astra Militarum's command structure argued that issuing a more powerful weapon, such as the bolt gun, would lead to higher battlefield efficiency. However, these proposals were quickly dismissed by the Departamento Munitorum and the Adeptus Mechanicus. The numbers made it clear. Mass deployment of bolt weapons was simply not sustainable on the required scale. The Imperium's war doctrine was not built around individual firepower, but around overwhelming numbers, and the lasgun fit this strategy perfectly. Once this decision was finalized, it became irreversible. The lasgun was no longer just a weapon. It was an inseparable component of the Imperium's military structure. Every campaign waged in the millennia that followed operated under the assumption that this weapon would be present in limitless numbers. The weapon itself was never intended to be the most powerful, but its ability to be sustained indefinitely was what secured its dominance. This moment defined the future of the Imperium's war machine. By prioritizing logistical efficiency over individual battlefield superiority, the Imperium ensured that its armies could be replenished endlessly. The lasgun was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of the Imperium's relentless endurance, a tool forged not for victory in a single battle, but for the eternal war that defined mankind's existence. The widespread deployment of the lasgun has had profound and lasting consequences on the Imperium, shaping not only its military doctrine, but also its broader strategic and societal structures. The weapon's influence extends far beyond the battlefield, affecting everything from the way wars are fought to how Imperial citizens perceive their role in service to humanity's war machine. The lasgun is more than just a firearm. It is an integral part of the Imperium's approach to warfare, survival, and control over its countless subjects. One of the most immediate and obvious effects of the lasgun's dominance is its role in defining the structure of the Astra Militarum. Because this weapon is standardized across all regiments, the Imperium has been able to maintain a cohesive and predictable approach to training, logistics, and battlefield tactics. Every soldier, regardless of the world they are drawn from, is expected to wield the same weapon with the same level of competence. This has allowed for an unprecedented level of uniformity across the Imperium's military forces, ensuring that replacements can be integrated into existing units with minimal disruption. The effectiveness of this system has enabled the Imperium to maintain an unending cycle of war, replenishing its ranks with a near-limitless supply of trained troops. Beyond its tactical applications, the lasgun has shaped the very way in which wars are waged across the Imperium. Its presence in every major conflict has reinforced the Imperium's doctrine of attritional warfare, where victory is not determined by technological superiority, but by sheer numerical endurance. Battles are fought with the assumption that soldiers are expendable, and as long as the weapons they wield remain functional, the Imperium's war machine can continue its relentless advance. The reliability of the lasgun ensures that this approach remains viable, as it allows for large-scale engagements without the logistical vulnerabilities that come with more sophisticated weaponry. This emphasis on mass warfare has had significant cultural and psychological effects within the Imperium. The average soldier understands that their primary role is not to be an elite warrior, but a piece of a much larger machine, one that will continue to function regardless of individual losses. This mindset is reinforced by the very nature of the lasgun. Its design does not elevate the wielder above their comrades, but instead reinforces the notion that all soldiers are equally replaceable. This has contributed to the Imperium's ruthless approach to military service, where the expectation of sacrifice is ingrained in every recruit from the moment they are conscripted. The lasgun's presence has also shaped the expectations of planetary defense forces, local militias, and other armed groups throughout the Imperium. Because it is the most accessible weapon available, it has become the default armament for any organization tasked with maintaining order or defending Imperial territory. From hive-world enforcers to feudal planetary garrisons, the lasgun is the tool of choice for those who enforce the Imperium's rule on a more localized level. This widespread availability ensures that Imperial law is upheld with a consistent level of firepower, reinforcing the Imperium's control over its vast population. Another major consequence of the lasgun's ubiquity is its impact on the Imperium's industrial and economic systems. The production and maintenance of these weapons is one of the largest ongoing efforts within the Imperium's manufactorums, with entire forge worlds dedicated to churning out new stockpiles at all times. The sheer volume required to sustain the Imperium's endless wars has made lasgun manufacturing one of the most significant aspects of the Imperium's economy. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains strict oversight over this process, ensuring that production quotas are met and that no deviations from the established schematics occur. Because the lasgun is so deeply embedded in the Imperium's military infrastructure, its continued use has influenced the technological stagnation that defines much of Imperial society. The Adeptus Mechanicus, bound by its rigid adherence to tradition, has little incentive to improve upon the lasgun's design. Instead, the focus remains on preserving existing patterns and ensuring that no disruptions occur in the vast supply network that keeps the Imperium armed. This lack of technological innovation means that while the lasgun remains functional, it has not evolved in any meaningful way for thousands of years. This reinforces the Imperium's reliance on overwhelming force rather than advancing its military capabilities through superior weaponry. The lasgun's role in the Imperium has also shaped how its enemies perceive human forces. While many Xenos races and heretical factions possess more powerful weapons, they have come to recognize that the true strength of the Imperium lies not in individual firepower, but in the relentless tide of soldiers armed with this simple, durable weapon. The sight of regiments advancing in perfect ranks, firing disciplined volleys of lasfire, has become synonymous with Imperial warfare. Even the most technologically advanced enemies understand that underestimating the seemingly basic lasgun can be a fatal mistake, as its reliability ensures that it will always be present in overwhelming numbers. Despite its widespread use, the limitations of the lasgun have also had long-term effects on the Imperium's military engagements. While it is reliable, it lacks the raw stopping power required to deal with some of the more resilient threats that the Imperium faces. Against heavily armored opponents or monstrous creatures, lasgun fire alone is often insufficient to bring down the target. This has necessitated the inclusion of support weapons, specialized infantry, and combined arms tactics to compensate for its shortcomings. However, this approach has also contributed to the Imperium's overall military philosophy, reinforcing the idea that no single soldier is expected to achieve victory alone. Instead, they are part of a greater whole, one in which individual firepower is secondary to the unyielding advance of the Imperial war machine. The continued reliance on the lasgun has also had unintended consequences in regions of the Imperium where resources are stretched thin. In some cases, entire regiments are forced to fight with worn or salvaged lasguns, as the massive demand for new weapons often outpaces supply. While the weapon's reliability allows it to function even under extreme conditions, prolonged use without proper maintenance can eventually degrade performance. This has led to instances where under-equipped regiments are sent into battle with weapons that are barely operational, further reinforcing the Imperium's disregard for the individual soldier's survival. Ultimately, the influence of the lasgun on the Imperium is not measured by its power or effectiveness alone, but by its ability to sustain the war effort indefinitely. It has shaped the very foundation of Imperial warfare, reinforcing a doctrine of endurance, sacrifice, and unrelenting mass deployment. Its presence ensures that the Imperium's armies never run out of weapons, but it also serves as a grim reminder that the Imperium itself is built upon an unending cycle of war. Whether this makes the lasgun the most reliable weapon in the galaxy remains a matter of perspective, but there is no denying its impact on every aspect of the Imperium's existence. The Imperial Lasgun, despite being one of the most widely used weapons in the galaxy, has a number of unique characteristics that make it a frequent topic of discussion among those who analyze the weaponry of the 41st millennium. While it is often dismissed as weak compared to more advanced firearms, its design, adaptability, and battlefield applications raise several points that fuel ongoing debate. Some argue that it is the most reliable weapon in existence, while others see it as a symbol of the Imperium's refusal to innovate. Among the most frequently discussed aspects are its energy source, firing capacity, ability to be modified, and the role it plays in large-scale warfare. One of the most notable aspects of the lasgun is its energy-based ammunition system. Unlike kinetic firearms that require constant resupply of solid projectiles, the lasgun relies on power packs, which can be recharged in a variety of ways. This feature alone makes it stand out among the many weapons of the Imperium, as it significantly reduces the logistical strain on supplying ammunition. Theoretically, a soldier armed with a lasgun can continue fighting indefinitely as long as a power source is available. In practice, this has led to many field modifications where guardsmen recharge their packs through exposure to sunlight, scavenged battlefield equipment, or, in some cases, dangerous jury-rigged power sources that can lead to unpredictable results. The standard power pack of a lasgun typically holds enough energy for several hundred shots, a number that vastly outperforms most projectile-based weapons. While the individual shots may lack significant stopping power, their sheer volume compensates for this shortcoming. This has led to the commonly used tactic of synchronized volley fire, where entire squads fire in unison to overwhelm enemy forces with relentless energy blasts. When properly coordinated, this strategy can be devastating, as it allows even lightly armed infantry to wear down armored or highly mobile targets through sheer weight of fire. Another aspect that sets the lasgun apart is its durability in extreme environments. Unlike traditional firearms, which require careful maintenance to prevent jams, overheating, or corrosion, the lasgun's simple design allows it to function in nearly any condition. It can be submerged in water, buried in sand, or exposed to extreme cold without losing effectiveness. There are countless battlefield reports of lasguns continuing to operate long after more complex weapons have failed, a fact that has solidified its reputation among the rank and file of the Astra Militarum. Modifications to the lasgun are another topic of frequent discussion. Despite the Adeptus Mechanicus's strict regulation of technology, many regiments, particularly those that have served for extended campaigns, have developed ways to enhance their weapons. Some common modifications include overcharging the power pack for increased damage at the cost of reducing its lifespan, replacing the standard focusing lens to alter the energy dispersion, and reinforcing the weapon's casing for better durability in close combat. While these adjustments can improve performance, they often come with risks, as improperly modified lasguns can overheat or discharge erratically. One of the more controversial aspects of the lasgun's design is the presence of a built-in power adjustment setting. While rarely acknowledged in official doctrine, many lasguns are capable of being adjusted to deliver significantly more powerful shots. The most well-known example of this is the so-called hot shot setting, which allows the weapon to discharge at a much higher intensity, capable of punching through armor that would normally withstand standard las fire. However, using this setting drastically reduces the number of shots a power pack can hold and risks damaging the internal components of the weapon. Because of this, hot shot settings are usually reserved for elite units or emergency situations rather than standard battlefield use. A recurring topic in discussions about the lasgun is how it compares to other weapons in the Imperium's arsenal. While it is often compared unfavorably to bolt weapons or plasma guns, these comparisons rarely take into account the intended purpose of each firearm. The lasgun is not designed to serve as an elite or specialized weapon. It is a mass-produced tool meant to function reliably across countless battlefields. Unlike bolt guns, which require specialized ammunition that can be difficult to manufacture in large quantities, or plasma weapons, which are prone to overheating and catastrophic failure, the lasgun maintains a level of consistency that allows the Imperium to deploy it on an unprecedented scale. Another commonly debated point is the psychological effect of the lasgun in combat. While it may lack the raw destructive power of other weapons, its near-silent discharge, lack of recoil, and precision make it uniquely suited for maintaining battlefield discipline. Unlike projectile-based firearms that create significant noise and disruption, lasgun volleys can be coordinated with remarkable accuracy. This makes them ideal for large formations of troops, as they allow for continuous fire without interfering with battlefield communication. Some regiments have developed entire combat doctrines based around the suppression capabilities of lasgun fire, using overwhelming amounts of energy-based attacks to force enemy troops into cover while heavier weapons are brought to bear. The question of whether the lasgun is the most reliable weapon in the Imperium often leads to discussions about its potential for improvement. Some argue that while its durability is unmatched, its raw damage output leaves much to be desired. There have been instances of enemy combatants shrugging off lasgun fire with little effect, leading to the perception that it is a weak weapon. However, others counter this by pointing out that reliability is not determined solely by lethality, but by how consistently a weapon performs under adverse conditions. The lasgun's ability to function without extensive maintenance, its high ammunition capacity, and its adaptability to different battlefield conditions make it a weapon that ensures the Imperium's ability to wage war indefinitely. Ultimately, the unique aspects of the lasgun contribute to its continued use, despite the availability of more powerful alternatives. Its place in the Imperium is not based on superiority in combat, but on its ability to sustain the largest war machine in the galaxy. Whether it is truly the most reliable weapon remains a topic of debate, but its continued presence in every major conflict is undeniable. For better or worse, the lasgun remains a defining feature of Imperial warfare, shaping the way battles are fought and ensuring that the Imperium soldiers are never without a weapon they can depend on. Among the countless individuals who have wielded or influenced the role of the lasgun in the Imperium, some have left a lasting mark on its history. These figures are not necessarily the most powerful warriors or the highest-ranking officials, but their actions, philosophies, and reputations have reinforced the weapon's place in the Imperium's military doctrine. From legendary soldiers to commanders who reshaped the way war is fought, each has played a role in defining what the lasgun represents. One of the most iconic figures associated with the lasgun is Lord Solar Macarius, the greatest Imperial commander since the earliest days of the Imperium. During his legendary conquests, which saw hundreds of worlds brought under Imperial rule, his armies relied heavily on the lasgun as their standard weapon. Unlike many Imperial generals who viewed the Astra Militarum as an expendable force, Macarius understood the value of tactical precision. Under his leadership, the lasgun was not just a weapon of attrition, It was an instrument of conquest used in disciplined formations and combined with rapid maneuvers to overwhelm enemies before they could react. His success proved that even a seemingly simple weapon could be devastating when used correctly. However, his reliance on human wave tactics also reinforced the belief that the lasgun was only as effective as the number of soldiers wielding it. His campaigns demonstrated both the strength and the limitations of the weapon. While it could sustain a massive military force, it was not a tool of elite warfare. Another key figure is Colonel Iron Hand Straken of the Catachan Jungle Fighters. Unlike the rigid, disciplined formations of other regiments, the Catachans favor guerrilla tactics, striking from the shadows and relying on their environment to outlast their enemies. Straken, a living legend among the Astra Militarum, embodies this philosophy. His use of the lasgun is distinct from that of other officers. While many see it as a weapon of mass firepower, Straken's soldiers use it with precision, turning the environment itself into a weapon. Catachan lasgun modifications, such as reinforced casings and jungle-adapted sights, are a direct reflection of his approach to warfare. Straken's success has challenged the idea that the lasgun is purely a weapon of attrition, showing that in the hands of highly skilled troops, it can be just as deadly as the more advanced weapons used by elite forces. However, his leadership is also a reminder that survival often depends on the soldier, not the weapon. A different perspective comes from Commissar Yarrick, a figure who has become legendary for his unyielding defiance against the orcs of Armageddon. While Yarrick himself is not known for personally wielding a lasgun in battle, his role in shaping the morale of the Astra Militarum has reinforced the weapon's importance. He is a symbol of resilience, a leader who embodies the idea that even the most basic weapons can achieve victory if wielded with the right determination. His speeches, discipline, and sheer willpower have ensured that countless regiments hold the line even when facing overwhelming odds. Yarrick's influence has turned the lasgun from a mere firearm into a symbol of duty. His soldiers believe that so long as they can fire their weapon, they still serve the Emperor. His legacy highlights one of the lasgun's most significant strengths. It is not just a tool of war, but a weapon that instills confidence in the Imperium's endless ranks. Another individual whose life was shaped by the lasgun is Sergeant Harker, another Catachan warrior known for his unconventional approach to combat. While he personally favors heavier firepower, his leadership within his regiment has demonstrated the adaptability of the lasgun in unconventional warfare. Catachans modify their weapons to fit their needs, a practice that Harker encourages, leading to some of the most durable and effective variants of the weapon. His battlefield strategies emphasize the importance of ambush tactics, rapid disengagement, and precision fire, methods that contradict the standard Imperial doctrine of overwhelming force. His success has reinforced the argument that the lasgun's true potential is not in its raw firepower, but in how it is used. However, Harker's reliance on specialized tactics also highlights the weapon's limitations. While highly effective in the right hands, it is not a weapon that guarantees victory on its own. From a different angle, the influence of General Stern of the Cadian 412th Regiment offers another perspective on the lasgun's role in large-scale warfare. Stern was a commander who fully embraced the combined arms approach, utilizing mechanized infantry alongside traditional foot soldiers. His campaigns reinforced the idea that the lasgun was not a standalone weapon, but part of a larger war machine. Under his leadership, Imperial soldiers operated in highly coordinated attacks, using their lasguns to pin down enemy forces while armored divisions delivered the killing blow. Stern's philosophy shaped modern Astra Militarum tactics, proving that while the lasgun might not be the deadliest weapon, it was one of the most effective when used in tandem with superior strategy. However, his dependence on coordination also revealed a flaw. Without proper support, a force equipped solely with lasguns could struggle against more heavily armed foes. Perhaps one of the more infamous figures associated with the lasgun is Colonel Schaefer, leader of the penal legion known as the Last Chancers. His soldiers, drawn from the worst criminals and deserters, were given little more than a lasgun and a single mission: survive long enough to earn redemption through service. Schaefer's approach was brutal. He understood that the weapon he handed his soldiers was not meant for victory, but for punishment. The last chancers were thrown into battles where survival was an afterthought, proving that while the lasgun was reliable, it was not a weapon that could turn the tide in the hands of untrained or unmotivated troops. His legacy is a grim reminder of the Imperium's philosophy. War is not won by superior technology, but by the willingness to sacrifice countless lives. On the manufacturing side, fabricator General Zagreus Kane of the Adeptus Mechanicus played a significant role in ensuring that the lasgun remained the Imperium's standard infantry weapon. Unlike many of his peers, who saw technological progress as heresy, Kane was more pragmatic. He understood that the Imperium's survival depended not on perfect weapons, but on weapons that could be produced endlessly. Under his influence, several Forge worlds adapted their production processes to improve lasgun efficiency while still adhering to the strict regulations of the Cult Mechanicus. His efforts ensured that the Imperium never faced a shortage of lasguns, solidifying their place in the Imperium's military doctrine. However, his pragmatism was met with resistance from more conservative factions within the Mechanicus, who viewed any attempt at optimization as a deviation from sacred tradition. Each of these figures, whether through direct combat experience, leadership, or logistical oversight, has played a role in shaping how the lasgun is perceived and used across the Imperium. Some have demonstrated its effectiveness when wielded with skill, while others have shown that its true strength lies in the countless hands that carry it into battle. Whether as a weapon of conquest, survival, or attrition, the lasgun remains at the heart of the Imperium's war machine, a tool shaped by those who wield it and the commanders who decide its fate. The Imperial Lasgun has been at the heart of countless discussions, theories, and unresolved debates within the Warhammer 40K community. While its role as the standard infantry weapon of the Imperium is undisputed, there are many lingering questions about its design, effectiveness, and the true extent of its reliability. Some of these debates stem from in-universe contradictions, while others arise from speculation on how the weapon might perform in situations that the official lore does not fully explore. These unresolved questions continue to fuel discussions with no definitive answers in sight. One of the most prominent debates revolves around whether the lasgun is truly the most reliable weapon in the Imperium, or if its reputation is merely a product of its widespread use. The argument in favor of its reliability is based on its ability to function in nearly any environment with minimal maintenance. However, critics argue that the weapon's perceived reliability is simply a matter of necessity rather than superiority. Since it is mass-produced on an unprecedented scale, any flaws or failures are overshadowed by the sheer number of functioning units. This raises the question: if the Imperium had the resources to equip its soldiers with something superior, would the lasgun still be considered the best option? Or is its reputation inflated because alternatives are either too costly or too complex to manufacture in the same quantities? Another widely discussed topic is the potential of the lasgun if the Adeptus Mechanicus allowed innovation. The Imperium's rigid technological dogma prevents most modifications or improvements beyond minor Forge world variations. However, there have been examples of enhanced lasgun variants, such as the more powerful hotshot models or modified versions used by elite regiments. This has led to speculation about how much stronger or more efficient the weapon could be if it were actively improved rather than preserved in its current state. Could a better version of the lasgun exist, one that maintains its reliability while increasing its firepower? Or is the weapon already at the peak of its practical design, and any attempt at improvement would undermine the qualities that make it so durable and easy to produce? A particularly interesting theory questions whether the lasgun was originally designed with limitations to ensure the Imperium's control over its troops. Unlike bolt weapons or plasma firearms, the lasgun does not pose a significant threat to high-ranking Imperials or those in positions of power. Some believe that the decision to standardize the lasgun was not just about efficiency, but also about maintaining control over the Imperium's vast armies. If every soldier were armed with a more lethal weapon, would rebellions or uprisings pose a greater risk to Imperial authorities? There have been instances where planetary uprisings have been put down largely because the rebels were limited to lasgun weaponry, which struggles against heavily armored forces. This raises the question of whether the Imperium deliberately restricts the firepower of its standard infantry weapon to ensure that its own forces remain manageable. The effectiveness of the lasgun against Xenos technology is another point of contention. While it serves adequately against lightly armored enemies, it often struggles against the more advanced defenses of the Imperium's primary adversaries. Against Necrons, for example, standard lasfire is virtually useless, as their self-repairing bodies absorb or recover from energy-based attacks with ease. Similarly, against heavily armored factions like the Adeptus Astartes or Chaos Space Marines, the lasgun's effectiveness is minimal unless applied in overwhelming numbers. This has led to discussions about whether the Imperium should develop an alternative weapon specifically for dealing with such threats, rather than relying on the sheer volume of fire from standard-issue lasguns. Would a modified lasgun variant, perhaps with armor-piercing capabilities, change the balance of power in these engagements? Or is the Imperium's reliance on heavy support weaponry the only viable way to counteract these deficiencies? One of the more controversial theories suggests that the lasgun's energy source could be far more potent than officially recognized, but its output is intentionally restricted. Some have speculated that the power packs used in lasguns are capable of much greater destructive force, but that their energy discharge is regulated to extend ammunition supply and reduce battlefield malfunctions. There are numerous battlefield reports of modified lasguns, whether through desperation or experimental field tests, being capable of melting through armor normally resistant to standard lasfire. If this is true, then why hasn't the Imperium adopted higher output settings as standard practice? Is it due to the risk of overheating and weapon degradation, or is there a deeper reason tied to Imperial doctrine? Another mystery lies in the apparent discrepancies in lasgun effectiveness depending on the regiment using it. While it is the same basic weapon issued across the Astra Militarum, different regiments seem to have varying levels of battlefield success with it. Some theorists believe this may be due to differences in power calibration by specific forge worlds. Others suggest that psychological factors play a role. Regiments trained to believe in their weapon's effectiveness may instinctively aim and fire more efficiently than those who see it as weak. If this is true, then does faith in the weapon contribute to its perceived reliability? And if so, does the Imperium's propaganda about the lasgun serve a functional purpose beyond morale? A lesser-known but equally compelling debate questions whether the Imperium actually understands the full potential of the lasgun's design. Since most technological knowledge is treated as sacred scripture rather than scientific engineering, there is the possibility that some aspects of the weapon's original specifications have been lost or intentionally hidden. If the Imperium were to rediscover certain lost technologies, would the lasgun evolve into something far deadlier? Or is it permanently locked in its current state, limited by the bureaucracy of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Imperium's fear of technological advancement? Lastly, there is the question of whether the lasgun will remain the Imperium's standard infantry weapon indefinitely. As war continues to escalate across the galaxy, new threats emerge that challenge the Imperium's traditional approach to warfare. Tyranid incursions, Necron expansions, and increasingly devastating chaos uprisings have forced the Imperium to adapt in ways it has historically resisted. If these threats continue to intensify, will the Imperium eventually be forced to abandon the lasgun in favor of something more powerful? Or will it remain in service, unchanging until the Imperium itself collapses? These unresolved questions and theories ensure that the debate over the lasgun's reliability is far from settled. While it may be the most commonly used weapon in the Imperium, whether it is truly the most reliable remains a matter of interpretation. Its strengths and weaknesses are defined not just by its construction, but by the doctrines, beliefs, and limitations that govern its use. Until the Imperium itself changes, the lasgun will likely remain a subject of both admiration and scrutiny, a weapon that is as much a symbol of humanity's resilience as it is a reflection of its stagnation. The long-term impact of the lasgun on the future of the Imperium, and by extension the wider galaxy, is deeply tied to the nature of its warfare, technological stagnation, and the evolving threats that humanity faces. While the weapon has endured for thousands of years, its continued dominance is not guaranteed. As the Imperium's enemies grow stronger and more advanced, and its own infrastructure strains under the weight of endless war, the question arises: will the lasgun remain the backbone of human infantry, or will necessity force change upon the Imperium? One of the most immediate long-term consequences of the lasgun's continued use is the reinforcement of the Imperium's war doctrine. The reliance on mass-produced, easily replaceable weaponry ensures that the Imperium will continue to fight wars of attrition rather than technological superiority. As long as the lasgun remains the standard-issue weapon, the Imperium will prioritize quantity over quality, ensuring that its military remains vast but ultimately expendable. This philosophy has allowed humanity to survive countless wars, but it also means that strategic innovation is stifled. The Imperium's enemies, particularly Xenos civilizations, continue to develop new weapons and tactics, whereas the Imperium remains largely locked into a war machine that has changed little over millennia. This stagnation could have dire consequences if enemy factions continue to evolve while the Imperium remains static. Some Xenos species, such as the Necrons and Tau, already wield superior weapons that outmatch the lasgun in both firepower and efficiency. If these enemies gain enough influence, entire Imperial campaigns could be rendered ineffective, forcing the Imperium into more desperate measures. The adaptability of the Astra Militarum and its ability to wage war through sheer numbers may not be enough if its soldiers remain outgunned in every engagement. In the long run, this could lead to catastrophic losses that the Imperium is unable to recover from, particularly if its already fragile logistics systems begin to fail under increasing pressure. A possible consequence of this is that certain factions within the Imperium may push for technological advancement, despite the rigid dogma of the Adeptus Mechanicus. While any widespread change to the lasgun is unlikely due to the Mechanicus's strict adherence to tradition, isolated attempts to improve its design may become more common. Rogue Forge worlds, under pressure to keep pace with the Imperium's enemies, may experiment with stronger power sources, higher output variants, or modifications that enhance the weapon's lethality. If such advancements prove effective, they may spread throughout the Imperium, potentially leading to a quiet, unofficial shift in how lasguns are manufactured and deployed. However, any deviation from the standard template risks being branded as heresy, meaning that even beneficial improvements could be suppressed before they have a chance to take hold. The reliance on the lasgun also shapes how Imperial citizens view war and their role within it. As long as this weapon remains the primary tool of the Astra Militarum, the expectation will remain that every soldier is replaceable, their lives valued only insofar as they contribute to the Imperium's war effort. This mindset ensures that the Imperium's leaders will continue to throw vast numbers of soldiers into battles, knowing that they can always replenish their ranks with fresh recruits. The long-term consequence of this is the continued devaluation of human life within the Imperium, reinforcing a cycle where wars are fought not to be won decisively, but to simply outlast the enemy. This approach may work for now, but if the Imperium reaches a point where its recruitment efforts can no longer match its casualties, this doctrine could collapse entirely. Another potential shift could come from external pressures, forcing the Imperium to reconsider its reliance on the lasgun. If humanity were to encounter a new enemy that rendered LAS-based weaponry ineffective, the Imperium would be forced to seek alternatives. There have already been instances where specialized weaponry has been deployed to counter specific threats, such as plasma and melta-weapons against heavily armored foes. If such situations become more frequent, it may drive a slow shift away from universal lasgun reliance, at least in elite or specialized regiments. However, such a shift would require an enormous restructuring of production and supply lines, something the Imperium is historically resistant to. Another factor to consider is how future wars may change the battlefield itself. As interstellar warfare continues, the conditions in which battles are fought are constantly evolving. If the Imperium begins to rely more on shipboard combat, urban warfare, or mechanized engagements, the lasgun may become less relevant in its current form. While it is adaptable, there are scenarios where its limitations become apparent. The rise of heavily fortified enemy positions or an increase in engagements against foes with highly resistant armor could eventually render mass lasgun fire less effective, prompting calls for stronger alternatives. Despite these possibilities, the overwhelming inertia of the Imperium makes it unlikely that any significant change will occur without extreme circumstances. The bureaucracy of the Departamento Munitorum ensures that mass production will remain focused on what has always worked rather than what could be improved. The Adeptus Mechanicus enforces strict adherence to the established lasgun designs, making large-scale innovation nearly impossible. Even if battlefield conditions begin to shift against the weapon, it is likely that the Imperium will respond with desperation rather than adaptation, throwing more soldiers into combat rather than reconsidering its reliance on the weapon itself. One of the darker long-term outcomes of this continued reliance is that it may contribute to the Imperium's eventual downfall. If its enemies continue to advance while it remains stagnant, a point may come where attrition alone is not enough to secure victory. The moment the Imperium finds itself outmatched without the ability to compensate through sheer numbers, its war machine will begin to break down. Whether this happens in centuries or millennia is uncertain, but as long as the Imperium refuses to evolve, it is always at risk of being left behind in the arms race of the galaxy. On the other hand, if the Imperium does survive indefinitely, the lasgun may be one of the few constants remaining. Unlike more advanced weapons that require rare materials or complex upkeep, the lasgun is simple enough that it can endure even if much of the Imperium's infrastructure crumbles. Even in a scenario where the Imperium is fragmented or reduced to a shadow of its former self, the lasgun may still be present, carried by whatever remnants of humanity continue to fight in the name of survival. It may not be the best weapon, but it is the weapon that will likely endure for as long as humans wage war. In the end, the significance of the lasgun is not just in its functionality, but in what it represents. It is the ultimate expression of the Imperium's philosophy, practical, unchanging, and brutally efficient. Whether this will continue to serve humanity or lead to its eventual downfall remains an open question. But one thing is certain. As long as the Imperium stands, the lasgun will remain at its side, a weapon that has defined its armies for thousands of years and will likely continue to do so for thousands more.